Magic Mage here with server 243, and we're back with our lessons regarding skills. Now, if you're curious on where I am pulling up this information, you can easily go to our home world. Within there is a guidebook. Select the guidebook and then move to development. It's that second tab. The last section within the developmental tab is skills and effects. You're going to want to go to the skills and effects tab, and it is going to be the second chapter. And today we're focusing on continuous damage. So there are multiple different types of continuous damage. You have suffocate, judge, disease, bleed, burn, tear, and poison. Now, continuous damage can come in multiple forms. It will come in both a continuous magical damage and continuous physical damage. So you're going to want to pay attention to those types of damages. Reason being is when you're creating defenses, you're going to want to look at defenses for both magical and physical defenses, and depending upon the skills that are being applied that will proctor some of these continuous damage buffs is how you're going to want to combat them when you're facing an enemy, or looking at some of your enemy weaknesses to be able to leverage those advantages for you. So we have two different types of continuous damage, both physical and magical, and within that continuous damage, they can proctor in 7 different ways. So we're going to take and go through each of these different types of effects. I'm going to point out what the buff symbol is and a little bit about a sample skill or artifact or ultimate skill that would proctor this to occur. Now, the nice thing about continuous damage buffs, they are all purple. Now, not all purple buffs mean they're continuous damage, but all your continuous damage buffs will be purple. So that's one thing to make sure you're paying attention to. If you haven't read my article on buffs and the symbols and what they mean, I highly encourage you to go and visit that resource. It will bring you through a majority of all of our buffs, some common and some uncommon, to really see what skills are proctoring them, what they look like, and what they mean. And I pulled this actually from that report based off of just continuous damage. Now, continuous damage, I have these listed in order of our book. So the first one is suffocate. This is that 3/ coming down at a diagonal. You can see suffocate easily with Harold's ultimate skill. That's Glacier Incursion. Another ultimate skill that you'll see a buff proctor for is Judgment. That is for Gilgamesh, and that is that purple cross. Plague is a skill that you'll see for Meb. It also will be listed as a disease. So that will give you that skull and crossbone, like exploding magical like ambiance off of that skull. Bleed is when you have those 3 drops of blood. That you can see in multiple skills. You can see it off of Takamon's ultimate skill, but you can also see it from Chaotic Blade. And then Burn, the most common one you'll see is really your Fire Dragon, and it's the Fire Dragon's first skill. There's other immortals that will take and have Burn. There's other skills that will do that, but really that Fire Dragon is going to be the best representation of that Burn. Now, Tear is the same symbol as Suffocate, so when you see this skill symbol come up, it may mean it's Tear and it may mean it's Suffocate. Just be aware, Tear and Suffocate have the same symbol, and an example of Tear would be Blade Vortex. That is in the Tower of Knowledge passive skill level 50. Another skill you might see is Poison. For an example, Toxic Nova. That's also a continuous magical damage, and you'll see that as kind of like this ink splot of purple paint exploding. So we have Suffocate, Judgment, Plague, Bleed, Burn, Tear, and Poison. And as I explained, I listed these in order of how you'll see those skills within our book, within our game. Now, as our book identifies, you have two different continuous damage types. One is physical and one is magical. Your physical would be your suffocate, your judgment, your bleed, and your tear. Your magical would be your burn, your plague or disease, and your poisons. So you have your physical and your magical buffs as identified here. And it's important to understand what is a physical buff and what is a magical buff so you can counter that effectively. Now, I indicated leveraging some of the continuous damage against your opponent and knowing where their weaknesses and strengths are. One way you can do that is when you're looking at your opponent, if you look at their immortal power under that opponent, you'll be able to see where their physical defenses and where their magical defense and where their physical defense is. So we'll see that actually Alexander has greater magical defense than physical defense for this immortal. We'll also see the different skills this immortal has and what they are performing, and that will allow us also to see how we can possibly counter some of those skills. Same thing with Zenobia. We'll be able to look at the physical defense, the magical defense. Again, this is higher in magical defense. We'll look at Quinn and his, and we have magical defense and physical defense, again higher in magical defense. And we'll look at Hannibal, and he has a physical defense and magical defense. And magical defense is just slightly higher, but it's almost equal. So this team here has higher defense rates against magic versus physical. One way that could be done is through our artifacts and the different gems you assign. So we can see he has placed a heavy amount of physical defense on his gems, and more so than his physical defense. Same thing here. Our magical defense is a little less than his physical defense here. This one's not going to have any of that because it's normally just the middle two. So we'll check again for Zenobia. Zenobia doesn't have any gems at all on hers. None for Quinn. And let's look at Hannibal. Hannibal has a lot more magical defense than physical added in, and just slightly more physical than magical. So look at your artifacts that's on your immortals, look at their overall immortal power, and that will help you know what skills you're wanting to leverage and which immortals that you really want to ensure you're protecting so that you're able to really make the most of your skills and the different artifacts and ultimate skills that your immortals have. So what I really want to do next is show you what continuous damage buffs look like within the battle, and then we'll look at the actual report after the fact. Now, the reason why I'm going against Zizo is we are fairly equally matched. Now, Zizo did use a prior march before this, and I've been using mine, but mine hasn't been super well brought down. So the good news about this is that we're looking at this march. It's my second march. It's not my main march. And it's also Zizo's second march, which makes them even more compatible. We can also see that his skills are very much developed similar to mine. Now, his Zenobia is not as developed as mine is in terms of the diamonds, but or the boost effect, but he does have it fairly advanced in, and he also has T7 troops where I have T6. He's using a mixed earth wind, where I am using a earth Himiko march for this case. But really what I want to pay close attention to is the bleed effect, which is that physical continuous damage effect coming in through chaotic blade, and then the magical continuous damage effect, which is coming in through toxic nova, and that one is going to be your poison effect. It's this poison here. So we have poison through toxic nova being delivered by Himiko. We have chaotic blade, which is issuing that bleed, And we're going to watch this battle report to see how that continuous damage is impacting these troops. So we're going to replay this here. And just make sure this battle loads. And when we're watching the buff reports, we're looking for those purple skills. Now remember, not all purple skills are going to show continuous damage, but all continuous damage skills are purple. And we're going to be looking particularly at the enemy side for bleed and for the skill of poison. So you'll notice the stun is also in purple, but that is not, there is poison. So we're going to pause here and we're going to pull up this buff report. So you'll notice that this is continuous damage. Poison went on 3 immortals at this point in time. So we'll see poison here. Now, remember what I said, that not all purple buffs are continuous damage. This is a great example. This is going to be your serious wound effect, and this is going to be your stun. So those 2 effects aren't considered continuous damage, where the poison is. So we're going to go back to our battle and replay it. Now watch this here. This is going to be causing damage. Now that just went off. So we're going to continue watching to see if we get that bleed effect to go into play. And it's just there. So you'll notice that poison did get enacted again. It's on 3 different immortals this time, and we also have that bleed effect coming into play. And that's also on 3 immortals. We have poison on 3 and bleed. So we have magical damage and physical damage happening on these immortals and against my enemy units. That is causing constant damage all the time while they're in effect. It's going in effect for 4.2 seconds right now. So we're going to exit that. We're going to continue watching. They will eventually come off and we'll see them go on again, hopefully one more time in this battle if it happens. So we're going to see. Yep, so we just saw bleed happen one more time on these battles here. And then we'll just see poison and bleed on both immortals again. So you have this occurring on the immortals while that is occurring. So that's how you can kind of see these buffs in these reports here. We're going to exit out of this battle. Let me just wait for it to clock down. And we're going to open up our stats report here. So when we open up our stats, we're going to look at our enemy stats, and I just need to get to that right battle. There we go. And we're going to look at the damage that they had taken. So with Himiko, we can see that the Toxic Nova damage occurred 4 attempts on Alexander. All 4 attempts resulted in that damage. It was 23% of the damage that was delivered from Himiko from that Toxic Nova. We're going to go next on to Quinn. Hannibal. Hannibal also had Toxic Nova delivered 3 times, 24% of that full physical damage. She also had the second piece here, which is the poisoning. So that's 15%. We'll look at Alex as well for the poisoning piece, and that is 5 attempts, 9%. Zenobia, if we look at Toxic Nova poisoning, we're at 9% as well. And if we're looking at Quinn, under Toxic Nova, we're looking at 13%. Now, the other one we're going to look at for damage taken is Alexander the Great. Chaotic Blade bleeding, that's 5 attempts here, and that is 42% of the damage from Alexander. We'll go to Hannibal. Look at Alexander the Great here. Chaotic Blade bleeding is 2 attempts, and that is 5% of the damage from this piece here. Zenobia, let's see if Alexander also did bleeding, 2 attempts, 37% of the damage. And then Quinn, if we look at Alexander, 5 attempts, 42% of the damage for Chaotic Blade bleeding. So you'll really see some significant damage in that aspect with regards to the damage that our enemies have taken over that long duration of time, and in regards to that bleed and the poison from Himiko's toxic nova here. So we have the poisoning, and it's really delineated in these parentheses. We also have the bleed, and it's going to be telling us that. So our continuous damage is actually pulled out separately from the skill itself. So that's another thing we're going to be wanting to look at when we're looking at some of these reports, is looking at multiple aspects of a specific skill that has been used. So I hope this really does break down some of that continuous damage, where you can see that damage done, how that impacts the overall immortal. When we look at the damage that they're able to perform, when we look at chaotic blade and bleeding, you'll see that's 13% of the damage for Alexander. We look at Himiko under toxic nova poisoning, you'll see that's 11% total out of the 17 attempts. And of her 17 attempts, the critical hits were 11 of them. None were dodged. We'll look at Alexander under bleeding. You'll see 5 were critical hits and none were dodged. So it really does show a significant breakdown of how much is regarding to these critical hits. That continuous damage under a critical hit is extremely devastating for an enemy troop. You'll actually see under Toxic Nova, almost all of them were critical hits for Himiko. And that is significant. If I had an artifact that actually enhanced her critical hits, that damage would be multiplied even further. I hope this helps you understand some continuous damage with regards to our skills. And until next time, have a wonderful day. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content.